Evening to those who are joining us live. I'm your host, Jen Horenjeff, and I am super duper excited tonight that we are going to have a very savvy chat with Kim McCleary, who is a pure legend when it comes to patient engagement. So we're super excited that she's here joining us. Kim's going to tell us all about what she's up to as well as what she's done. She is the founder and CEO of the Kith Collective, and she'll be telling us a little bit about that. And she was formerly at FasterCures, as well as been working in patient advocacy for the past 30 years. So we're really in for a treat, and we welcome Kim tonight. So Kim, I know you're on the road. Why don't you let us know where you're calling in from tonight?
I'm calling in from Boston, Massachusetts this evening. Great to be with you, Jen.
Awesome. So where are you? You're in Boston this evening?
I am.
Excellent.
Usually stationed in the DC area. So.
Yeah. Excellent. So tell me a little bit about your background. You know, you've had such an extensive history. So let's get everybody up to speed on why you really are somebody that we need to be listening to here. So a little bit more about what you did prior to founding Kith.
So let's see. For 22 years, I was the chief staff executive, CEO of a patient organization called the CFIDS Association of America, that is now the Solve ME CFS initiative, working on behalf of patients with myalgic encephalomyelitis or chronic fatigue syndrome, or ME CFS, as it's now known by. And for 22 years, very much on the forefront of fighting for the patient voice in research and how healthcare was delivered, in bringing patients into decision-making kind of at all steps along the way. And for those who don't know anything about ME/CFS, it is, you know, a very still, unfortunately, kind of mysterious condition, very much like multiple sclerosis in the way it presents, although for most patients they have a very sudden onset. Most people can remember the day and the time of day that they first fell ill, and it has a lot of stigma attached to it because it has neither a diagnostic test for it yet or any kind of FDA-approved treatment. So patients very much have to fight for diagnosis, and they have to fight for good care in the healthcare system. So that was the background I had for 22 years. I spent just a few months doing some consulting work. ME/CFS was the first of the conditions that FDA featured in its patient-focused drug development initiative, the first of the 20 meetings. So that was a great opportunity and kind of the last thing that I did, working with that organization before moving to DC. And so that summer after I left Charlotte, North Carolina, and moved to DC and left the organization, I helped the narcolepsy community prepare for its PFDD meeting. And that was the first of the rare disease meetings. And then I also
don't know what's a PFDD meeting.
Oh, sorry. Patient-focused drug development. It is a program that the FDA started following the negotiations with industry called PDUFA 5, the Prescription Drug User Fee Act, that was passed in 2012 and became law in 2012, required the FDA to do these 20 meetings on 20 different conditions, bringing the patients in for the very first time in a non-product specific setting to talk about what the disease was like to live with, what the symptoms and the impacts were that most affected patients in terms of their ability to function and how they felt, and what their treatment expectations were. So with ME/CFS being the first of those, it was a great opportunity to sort of set the bar for how that series would play out. And we knew
how did you feel that meeting went?
It was, I think it exceeded everybody's expectations. I have to say the FDA was a little nervous. It was the first time they were doing this kind of thing, and our community knew we had an opportunity to kind of set the pace. We had really good participation, even though it was just a short time between when the FDA announced the meeting and gave the meeting date. We were actually very intent on bringing not just the individuals who could make it there on a single day in the month of April, I think, 2013. But we launched a survey to gather the community perspective for people who wouldn't be able to get to a hotel ballroom in Silver Spring, Maryland on a particular day. And we had, I want to say, about 1,400 survey responses in a pretty short time to bring with us, in addition to the 75 to 80 or so patients who were able to get there. So that kind of set down a marker for what kind of participation levels could be achieved. And then the second meeting was on HIV, I think was cure research for HIV. The third meeting was on lung cancer, and neither of those meetings were very well attended at all. I want to say 12 to 15 patients for each of them, believe it or not. And so FDA was a little bit nervous about a rare disease meeting that was going to be the fourth in the series and the first on a rare disease. So I had the opportunity to work with the narcolepsy community, and we kind of used the MECFS model. We rallied the community and got the groups that were active in that space kind of working together. We did a survey, and we really sort of beat the bushes and gave everybody, you know, the impetus to get there or to fill out the survey. And we had almost 2,000 survey responses, which for a rare disease was pretty remarkable, again, in a pretty short period of time.
I'll say. So, I mean, you make it sound easy. You are like, you're trained in sort of all of these things, patient engagement. But, you know, I think where I've seen in the industry now, I'm hearing more and more of people wanting to do these things. And people toss out buzzwords just like it's their job, talking about patient centricity and patient engagement and wanting to improve the patient experience. But do you, in your experience, see that this is something that is here to stay? Or is this like a fad and just the latest way to try to get more conversations going that might be benefiting the industry?
You know, I'm sort of two minds on that question. I get asked that question a lot, actually. Is it here to stay? I think it's here to stay in one sense because socially, culturally, everything is moving toward a greater emphasis on the individual and a less paternalistic environment for healthcare. And what I mean by that is, even think about the way we buy coffee now. I mean, in the 1960s, Taster's Choice was introduced so that you could get the same cup of coffee every morning without even having to try very hard. All you had to know how to do was to boil water. And everybody's Taster's Choice coffee tasted the same. Now we walk into a Starbucks and we have a very specific beverage we have in mind that's not going to be anything like any of the people in front of us in line or any of the people in back of us in line. We're very particular about the way that we consume a lot of different goods. Healthcare has lagged pretty far behind a lot of those other trends, but it's gradually starting to catch up, and our expectations for the kind of care that we get in the doctor's office, in hospital setting, from the pharmacy, are going to soon kind of model after other things in our life where we're consumers expecting to have a very individualized, personalized experience. So that's kind of one trend. I think that this is just, you know, kind of consumerism as it marches by, and somewhat generational of not having the same expectation for, you know, the doctor knows best and just taking their advice. All of us feel like we have both the right and the obligation and responsibility to be more informed about the choices that we think we should have, and to maybe push back on somebody who wants to just sort of pat you on the head and say, there, you don't really know what you're talking about. Let me just write this prescription, you fill it and take the medicine like a good girl. We're just not, you know, that's just not the way things are moving in our culture. I think the other part that is going to make it hopefully stick is when the companies who develop medical products in particular, I think it's got more traction there than in maybe other parts of the healthcare environment, start to see how much better the processes are that they are, doing to develop medical products, how much they benefit both from the way that their processes go and the products that they ultimately develop, because of the interaction they can have with patients now. I think it will become a business imperative, not just a, part of a marketing appeal or a market differentiator or something that sounds good from a corporate social responsibility standpoint. I think it's going to make a business difference that will ultimately kind of embed it. Now, all of that said, if we don't make it work, it could go away because, all of these things kind of come and go, and the ones that stick are the ones that make sense from a business standpoint.
Yeah, and oh my gosh, there's so much to unpack there, because I think you're right. Ultimately, we do have to show that there is a reason why we should be working with patients. But, my question is around all these conversations of we need to, improve the patient experience and all these things. Isn't that lovely? We're all patient-centered. Hooray. Do you think that organizations can truly be patient-focused and be patient-centric if they don't work directly with patients? Is there a way to still do this?
I don't think so in the way that you and I expect them to do it.
Yeah.
There are a lot of companies, not just in kind of the pharmaceutical or medical device world, to say, oh, of course we're centered on patients. That's why we all come to work every day. And when you get into the nitty-gritty of what they're doing, they are, pretty divorced from the actual end users of the things that they're working on every day. I think there's a lot of what Bray Patrick Lake would call patient-centeredness out there, of things that companies are doing, maybe kind of applying like a Band-Aid on the flesh wound, or some nice shellac coating on something that wasn't very patient-centered to start out with, but they're trying to make it look a little more appealing.
Yeah.
I think some companies are sort of skating by with that. Others, I think, are really digging in and saying, okay, this is going to be an imperative from the top down. We're going to expect employees from the bottom up to figure out how to do this, how to integrate it into their workflows. We're going to start making this part of our compensation system, part of our annual performance evaluations. There are going to be certain expectations. And I am starting to see that kind of thing play out.
Yeah, and what I see, and Kim, you and I see each other at conferences all the time, and it's really exciting to see the people that are there, and we all get revved up and go, hooray, everyone's bought in, everybody cares about working with patients. But then you remember that this is just a subset of the industry that are really attending that. So in terms of those people going back to their workplaces and implementing the things that we all are talking about, what kind of buy-in do you need? Is it something that just as an individual, an employee, I can go and take this to my pharma company? Or do we really have to see this as an organizational shift, and that there has to be buy-in from the top?
I think it's the latter. It's got to be an organizational change management, just like other things have been. There didn't used to be kind of corporate quality, right? That was not something that was embedded in the industry until really pretty recently. That quality was sort of the last thing you had to pass before your medicine could go out the door, and now it's really baked in from the beginning. And I think I use that as an illustration of what really has to happen with patient centricity. It's not enough to have patients involved, say, at the point of regulatory approval, and they're advocating on behalf of a particular medication when it goes before the FDA. Like, that's way too late. You better hope that you've gotten it right all the way up until then. And some of these products take 15 to 20 years to develop. So we're not talking about something that can change overnight. And to really bring the patient voice all the way back into really kind of a deep understanding of what the experience of living with that condition is, all of the factors that affect the individual and the family and the family unit as a result of a particular condition, and to really understand the choices that the individual has to make on a day-to-day basis, and how a particular medical product or care delivery might fit into their life, not just, are they taking the medicine or not. That's just, it does take a lot to really start to inculcate that into everything that you're doing, and to bring it into all of the processes that occur over that 10 to 15 year period when you're developing a new product.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm seeing some comments here in the chat that, someone's talking about a self-appointed patient experience officer at an organization saying, we don't need patient input. We know what they want. And I think that, this is something common, and certainly how it was done, that people just assumed that they knew what patients needed, or if they wanted to know what they needed, they would talk to doctors or other clinicians. So tell us a little bit more about what you do at Kith Collective, now working with other companies as a consultant, and why do we need organizations like yours, or ours, a Savvy Cooperative, or organizations focused on helping people be more patient-centered? Why is that necessary?
Yeah, so I think the first thing to make sure that kind of we have as a foundational understanding is that healthcare and medical product development is one of the most tightly regulated parts of the economy. And for, up until this law, the PDUFA 5 passed in 2012, companies didn't think they were supposed to talk to patients, or they thought it was, pretty unusual for them to be allowed to do that, because they've always been worried about the very bright line that has been drawn for pre-approval marketing, where you can't sort of gin up a marketplace by the prospect of something new coming, in the pipeline that could potentially, deliver a certain set of benefits, and, with a particular risk profile. So companies were very hesitant, and it's really created this tremendous environment in many companies that is very nervous about this whole idea of engaging with patients, because they're still sort of stuck in the mindset of we're not allowed to do that. And it's interesting to see how many people in kind of the meetings that you and I go to have had to spend a lot of time with their legal departments in their companies, sort of getting them over the hump and bringing, materials like from FasterCures and National Health Council, and the FDA itself now is starting to release guidance that's been very helpful to prove to them that this is a new era, and the agency is actually expecting that to happen. So I think that's one of the big changes, and one of the reasons why, I'm excited about the work I'm doing right now, is because it's really kind of on those front lines of starting to get all the players you have to mobilize within a company or within an organization to all be pulling in the same direction, and not just having sort of a knee-jerk reaction to, oh, we're not allowed to do that, clear the decks, forget that conversation. No. We have to hire a PR firm to do that for us, or we have to hire a market research firm, because we're not allowed to talk to patients directly. So it's a big cultural change.
Yeah. And so what is it? What are the trends that are happening that are even making people start to flirt with these ideas of working with patients? And in your experience, there's a lot about regulations. Of course, we talked about sort of the competitive advantage of having people work with patients from the beginning so their products can be better, or they just genuinely want to do right by patients. What is it that's making people kind of go in this direction?
Well, as I mentioned, I think part of it is just the change in our culture and society, is that all of us have different expectations about the care that we're getting. A second thing is the agency is starting to lay down its expectations in a very clear and visible way. Industry relies on something called FDA guidance to use as like a playbook for how to anticipate what the expectations are when they bring a new product forward, either for expanded clinical trials or for regulatory approval. And the FDA has issued kind of the first of those in draft form that's pretty detailed, that sets down pretty clear direction saying, you better start thinking about this stuff because we're going to be asking about it when you come to us with your plans. And that change, it's remarkable how much difference that makes, rather than, you know, sort of guessing it, is this just a, I don't know, sort of a noisy bunch of pioneers who want this to change, but the agency is still somewhat reluctant. And I wouldn't ever say that everybody at FDA is 100% bought into this either. It's a big institution as well. I think there have been some exciting kind of first movers in the space that have really kind of taken this on in a very visible way, that have gotten attention for the work that they're doing, and that the word gets around. And now, what's that?
Can you give us some examples?
Well, of course, like Ann Beal was the first person hired by a major pharma company as the chief patient officer. She had come to Sanofi as the company from the PCORI, the Patient-Centered Outcomes Research Institute, and you know, just kind of having the visibility of a company of that size and magnitude, working in so many different therapeutic areas, having a chief patient officer. I think Raj Schneider at Pfizer is very visible and, you know, directly reports into the chief medical officer at Pfizer. That kind of sets an expectation where the smaller companies start to think about, well, gosh, let's think about what our patient function within our company looks like. And for many of them, they're still sort of in that traditional model of buying tables at gala events or passing out water bottles at the walkathon, or, you know, pretty marginal patient centricity, right? You know, supportive of the community in a very sort of outdated way, I would think. And
yeah, well, I mean, it's interesting because I think about like the smaller companies and that they have such an opportunity because they can be more nimble. They might not have the same resources, but I do feel in a way that they can really leverage the fact that they're smaller and still do the right thing.
Yeah, and some of them do. There are some, you know, especially on the biotech side, that tend to be, you know, a little more nimble. They are working in kind of more, I don't know, agile environments because of the technologies that they're using, and they really do see the benefit. In the rare disease community, it's almost impossible to develop a drug without some engagement with the patient community because there aren't that many patients often, and they tend to be very densely organized. So you've got examples like Parent Project Muscular Dystrophy that has just done really remarkable work that's important not only in the Duchenne community, but to all patient advocates because of the way that they have sort of been on the front of the spear, moving regulatory expectations, really challenging the status quo, helping de-risk research into Duchenne and bringing more academic partners, more corporate partners into the field. And I think that has created kind of a shift, not only in what industry recognizes as a solid patient partnership, but also in terms of what other patient organizations see as an opportunity for them to follow a similar model. So I think it's happening in both directions. There are great kind of early leaders in the biopharma space, but we shouldn't discount either that some patient organizations are moving faster than others to mobilize their communities and sort of meet the new opportunity and expectation.
Yeah, well, that's a beautiful segue into one of the questions that we just got in the chat box here, asking you, how do you think that Savvy and other nonprofits could benefit from working together to help get the patient voice out there more in the process of developing these things?
Yeah, I think what's exciting to see happening in the patient community side of things is, I would say when I kind of got involved in the 90s, there was very much sort of a poster child, if you will. Like every disease had sort of a key spokesperson, and it could be a person with lived experience or a parent or somebody. And that was the person who showed up at every meeting, who got called to testify in front of Congress, who, you know, was up on the stage at different events. And that was sort of, you know, the person who represented the patient voice as if it were one thing, very, you know, unidimensional. And what's exciting to me now is there's this growing interest in understanding that it's not the patient voice, it's patient voices, that there's a whole range of patient journeys, that there are all kinds of factors that play into how your expectations might be different from my expectations, even if we had the same diagnosis, and how your outcomes that you prioritize might be different from mine. And that creates opportunities for platforms like Savvy, for organizations that have patient registries or research platforms, or places where you can really aggregate information and then see where are their patterns and where are the, you know, kind of, if you think about the usual curve, where is that middle point? But what do the tails tell us that otherwise we would have just totally missed because we were thinking about too few people in our head as what that patient experience looks like?
Absolutely. I mean, that lack of diversity is something that is talked about. I'm excited that people are acknowledging it, but how do you think people can really help solve that?
I think we have to get beyond, and it's going to be a challenge for everybody, not just the companies, not just the FDA, but the patient community as well. We have to get beyond sort of the connected few, and we really have to start going beyond kind of where people might normally look for patients in the healthcare setting, but go out to community groups, start to think about like faith-based communities and how you can reach out to them, you know, sororities, fraternity. There are all kinds of different trusted brokers that you could involve. And we've just got to get more creative about
I agree.
Because they're not all sitting in the doctor's waiting rooms. A lot of people opt out of the healthcare model, and we're missing out on understanding what their needs and expectations are completely because we're not looking in the right places. It's like dropping your keys and only looking under the street light or whatever that phrase is.
I'm loving your analogies tonight. I remember some of these, that healthcare is like Starbucks, coffee.
I have a whole PowerPoint if you ever.
I love them. Excellent. So, you know, we're talking about this. Other organizations might be listening to this and thinking, oh gosh, you know, is it too late? Can I still get patient input?
No, it's not too late. Never too early and it's never too late. That's my phrase.
Yeah, so I think that's a good reminder that it's okay if you're just coming about to kind of getting patients involved, that it's something that, you know, there's a lot of people that are new to this, but there are amazing organizations and people like you that are here to help. So tell us a little bit about Kith Collective, and please plug anything that you're working on because you're doing such amazing things. I wish that we could spend the next hour just diving into them, but give them a little taste of what you're working on.
Yeah, so thanks, Jen. Oh boy, I've had the opportunity. So Kith Collective started in February, so I'm just like heading into the 6th month, and it's been very exciting to work with organizations, kind of big and small, and trying to do things like some of these externally led PFDD meetings in new disease areas, and then to help some companies who want to really tone what they're doing and start to move it from kind of the first movers out to be more of a company-wide expectation, and to see what that looks like. And find myself sometimes like, oh, I can't believe I thought we were farther than this, but we're getting there. And it's exciting to see how fast it can move once you start to see some of the benefits of it. So I've worked on 2 patient-focused drug development meetings, one for the Duchenne community with Parent Project Muscular Dystrophy, and I do have the report from that meeting, which I think is a great read, even if you don't know anything about Duchenne muscular dystrophy, just to show the power of the patient voices and the community voices. And that report also has pieces of it that bring the data in from PPMD's patient registry and other studies that have been done. And it sets a public policy agenda that is patient-centered, that emerged from all of the unmet needs that were articulated on that day with the FDA and many other agencies listening in. So that was a really great project to have as my first one. I also work with the sleep apnea community on their patient-focused drug development meeting, which for the first time we had 2 centers from the FDA, the Drug Center and the Devices Center, come together because the centerpiece for sleep apnea care is a medical device called the CPAP machine. So it's great to have CDRH there and to have CEDAR at that meeting. And we did a survey of that community, and we'll end up with about 6,500 survey responses to bring, in addition to just the amazing conversation that was had in the room on June 8th, and helping the depression community get ready for their PFDD meeting that will be November 16th. And on Wednesday, we will launch a nationwide survey on lived experience and research priorities for depression and bipolar. And we were so excited to work with Savvy to help us test that survey and get feedback on it as part of a really intensive user-centered design project or element that we did in creating that survey, working with a group of volunteers with lived experience to really inform the development of that survey, and then to have a Savvy co-op group really help us fine-tune kind of the last bits of it before we make it public on Wednesday.
And so we're going to get that posted to you all who are listening in. So some of you were part of that sort of co-design experience and giving feedback on it, but we'll get you the real deal so that you can weigh in, because we want as many people as possible to help inform their work, because it's so amazing that you guys are really reaching out to so many patients and patient groups to elevate and amplify the patient voice.
Yeah, it's going to be amazing to see how many survey responses we can get. We've got yeah.
I think we're cutting out a little bit. Can you hear me?
I can.
Okay, awesome. All right, anything else you want to plug, or can I go to my rapid fire questions?
You can go to your rapid fire questions.
Woohoo, my favorite time. Although the whole thing is my favorite because you're so amazing, and I even have to come to a close here.
Mutual admiration society here.
Well, all right. So let's go into some of these, because I think, so many of us pour our hearts and souls into this, but it's important to remember that we're humans and we have other things that sometimes we do. So what do you do when you're not being savvy and working with patients and trying to amplify the patient voice?
So I love living in Washington, D.C. I have been there for 5 years, and I never tire of spending a Sunday morning like I did today. I went running past the Iwo Jima Memorial and over the Key Bridge and down the Georgetown waterfront and past the Lincoln Memorial. I just love the city. So I love taking in little bits and parts of it. My husband grew up there, so he knows all its nooks and crannies, and it's fun to keep discovering new neighborhoods and areas of the city. I have 2 grown kids who neither one live by, but love traveling and seeing them in different places. And right now I'm reading a book called Bad Blood about the Theranos situation. I won't refer to another S word I could, but it's fascinating, and it's keeping me sort of up late flipping pages.
I know. I promised Kim we would keep this conversation short so she could get back to her reading and then tell me all about it. All right.
I work an awful lot, so those are things I cram into the corners of my life. Yeah.
Well, I think it's a great lead into the next question of what's one of the biggest healthcare headaches or challenges that you think we need to address? It doesn't have to be about Theranos.
Gosh, one of the biggest healthcare headaches. I think we still just do a terrible job dealing with patients in doctors' offices. Like, it's getting better, but you just think about all of the customer experiences you have now and how elevated they have become and how much convenience there is built into so many of the services that we take advantage of on a day-to-day basis. And healthcare just seems to just be, decades behind in that regard. And, it's just, but yet it's still very expensive when we pay more for our healthcare than most other countries. So it's just this mystifying thing, and we don't even expect to be treated well in a doctor's office anymore. We don't, think twice about the 45-minute wait in the waiting room, or being left in an exam room with, a terribly awful paper gown that doesn't close in the back, and then you got to walk down the hall, and it's terrible. I mean, we got to do something better than that.
I know. I once, many years ago, I had taken a boyfriend with me to a doctor's appointment, and this one notoriously was about like a 3-hour wait, and he couldn't handle it. He just kept saying, like, you have to go see if they forgot about you. I'm like, this is just the way it is. Like, you just clear your schedule. And yeah, why do we accept that? You wouldn't wait for 3 hours at a restaurant, so it's just bonkers.
I was in a doctor's office, and they had the scale, they weigh you when you first get there, and they had it in like the waiting room, and they called out the number. And it was just like the most humiliating thing. Like, why?
Well, did they at least do it in kilograms so that people would have to do the conversion?
No, it was not.
Well, maybe they can call out your height, make you feel a little bit better when you feel
right.
That's bizarre.
Yeah.
All right. My favorite question that I give people time to prep because I just think it's fun. But so what song title did you come up with that you think best describes the current state of healthcare?
So your reference to me as an OG, which
I do. I say that Kim's an OG of patient engagement.
Original Gangster got me thinking about that era of music, and I won't try to fit something into a rap song, but it did make me think about Alanis Morissette's "You Ought to Know," because I think there's an awful lot in healthcare that would be improved if the institutions, the companies, the organizations that delivered healthcare talk to patients more frequently, because there's a lot of lived experience and a lot of important insights and knowledge that they ought to know if they want to serve better.
Oh my gosh, I love that one so much. And you went to 90s music, which just seems to be my favorite. And the fact that like Alanis Morissette is like screaming and yelling in that song, I feel
absolutely like the whole tone of it is, maybe we won't always be that strident, but it does sort of show this change in being very passive and polite to, you ought to know this, and darn it, I'm going to make sure you hear it from me.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, it's our new battle cry. I love it. I love it. Well, this has been absolutely terrific. I don't want to keep you from your amazing book that you're diving into, but thank you so much, Kim, for taking the time to talk with us today about really what is one of our values at Savvy Cooperative, which our members helped us to develop, is to be both patient first and patient with. And the fact that we can't put patients first if we don't work with them at the beginning. So you are the exact right person to really have that conversation with. So I invite all of our listeners to join us next week when we will be talking with Mia and Tina from Diagram, a design firm, and they're going to be talking about one of our other values, which is innovating with purpose. And we're really going to dive into what does that mean. So thank you so much, Kim. Enjoy the rest of your time in Boston, and I'll let you say a final goodbye.
Well, thanks, Jen. I'm just so excited to be part of the Savvy Co-op and the Savvy Chat, and love what you guys are doing, and look forward to many more opportunities to work together.
Fantastic. And to all of our listeners now and in the future, thanks so much for chiming in, and join us again next week for another Savvy Chat. All right, take care, everybody. Good night.